The blood-red sunset cast long shadows across Rattlesnake Gulch as Katherine Galloway stepped off the stagecoach, her face partially hidden beneath the wide brim of her bonnet. Every eye in the dusty frontier town turned toward her, some curious, others suspicious of any newcomer who arrived unannounced in the summer of 1875. "You'll find rooms at Madame Foster's boarding house," the stagecoach driver called after her, pointing toward a whitewashed building at the far end of the main street. "Tell her Hank sent you." Katherine nodded her thanks, gripping her single leather suitcase tightly as she made her way through the town. The weight of the stairs upon her felt heavier than the oppressive Wyoming heat. She kept her gaze fixed firmly on the ground before her, careful not to make eye contact with any of the townsfolk who had paused in their evening routines to observe her passage. Behind her, whispers already began to circulate. "Another Eastern lady come to find herself a husband, I reckon," an old man sitting outside the general store commented to his companion. "No wedding ring," another replied, squinting after her retreating form, "but she ain't dressed like one of them mail-order brides neither." "Something ain't right about her," the first man concluded. "Got that look of someone carrying more than just that suitcase, if you catch my meaning." At the saloon across the street, Beau Eckhart leaned against the weathered porch post, his keen eyes following the newcomer's progress. At 30 years old, he'd spent most of his life on horseback, working cattle across 3 territories. The last 5 years he'd settled in Rattlesnake Gulch, building a modest ranch outside of town while taking on occasional work as a scout and tracker for the local marshal when needed. "She's hiding something," Frank Wilson, the town's blacksmith, remarked as he joined Beau on the porch. "Mark my words." Beau took a slow pull from his cigarette, a faint smile crossing his sun-weathered face. "Then let her hide in me," he said softly, almost to himself. Frank gave him a sideways glance. "What's that supposed to mean?" Beau shrugged, grinding out his cigarette under his boot heel. "Just that folks ought to mind their own business. Woman's got a right to her secrets, same as any man. You going soft on us, Eckhart?" Frank laughed. "Or just lonely out there on that ranch of yours?" Beau didn't answer, his attention still fixed on the young woman as she disappeared into Madame Foster's boarding house. Something about her stirred his interest in a way he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just her fine features or the elegant way she carried herself, but the determined set of her shoulders despite the obvious weight of whatever burden she bore. Inside the boarding house, Katherine was greeted by a robust woman with iron gray hair pulled into a severe bun. Madame Foster's shrewd eyes assessed Katherine from head to toe before she spoke. "Rooms 50 cents a night includes breakfast, suppers extra, no gentlemen callers after 9, no exceptions." "That's fine," Katherine replied, reaching into her reticule for the money. "I won't be staying long. Just until I can make arrangements to travel north." "North?" Madame Foster raised an eyebrow. "Not much up there but wilderness and trouble, miss." "Nevertheless, that's where I'm headed," Katherine said firmly. After being shown to a small but clean room on the 2nd floor, Katherine locked the door behind her and leaned against it, finally allowing herself a moment of vulnerability. She removed her bonnet and unpinned her chestnut hair, letting it fall in waves down her back as she crossed to the window. The town was quieting as dusk deepened, though light and laughter still spilled from the saloon. She pressed her hand against the window glass, feeling the residual heat of the day. How far had they followed her? How much time did she have before they caught up? 3 days, perhaps 4 if she was lucky. Not enough time to properly rest, but enough, maybe, to figure out her next move. Morning came too quickly. Katherine dressed carefully in her second-best dress, a practical navy blue cotton with minimal trim. She'd sold most of her finer clothes weeks ago to fund her escape. At breakfast, she kept to herself, politely deflecting Madame Foster's attempts at conversation. She needed supplies, a horse, and information about the trails heading north, all without drawing undue attention to herself or her plans. The general store seemed the logical first stop. Katherine was examining a display of sturdy boots when the bell above the door jingled. She glanced up to see the cowboy she'd noticed watching her the previous evening. Up close, he was even more imposing, tall and broad-shouldered with a face that spoke of years under the sun. His eyes, though, surprised her a warm hazel that didn't match his otherwise rugged appearance. "Morning," he greeted her, tipping his hat. "Beau Eckhart saw you arrive yesterday." Katherine nodded cautiously. "Katherine Galloway. Looking for traveling gear, Miss Galloway?" he asked, nodding toward the boots she'd been examining. "Just browsing," she answered too quickly. "Getting my bearings in town." The store owner approached, his friendly smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Don't get many fine Eastern ladies shopping for trail boots. Special occasion. I enjoy riding," Katherine replied evenly. "I thought I might explore the countryside during my stay." "Countryside around here ain't exactly suitable for a lady's leisure ride," the store owner commented. "Indians up north, rough country east and west, and nothing but desert south." "I'm more capable than I appear," Katherine said, setting the boots down. "I'd be happy to show you some safer trails," Beau offered, his voice casual but his eyes intent. "Got a gentle mare at my ranch that would suit a lady rider." Katherine studied him, trying to determine his motives. Was he merely being neighborly, or did he suspect something? In her experience, men rarely offered assistance without expecting something in return. "That's very kind, Mr. Eckhart," but the door burst open again, and the local marshal stepped inside, his gaze immediately finding Katherine. "Miss Galloway, might I have a word with you outside?" Katherine's heart hammered in her chest, but she kept her expression neutral. "Of course, Marshal." Outside on the boardwalk, the marshal, a man in his 50s with a weathered face and a neatly trimmed gray mustache, regarded her seriously. "Got a telegram this morning from Denver," he said without preamble. "Seems they're looking for a young woman matching your description." Katherine's mouth went dry. "Is that so? Says here you might be traveling under an assumed name. Says you're wanted for questioning regarding the disappearance of a significant amount of money from the household of one Judge Samuel Hollister." "I see," Katherine said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "And what else does this telegram say?" "Just that I'm to detain you until representatives from Denver arrive." The marshal's eyes softened slightly. "They should be here within the week." "Marshal, I assure you there's been a mistake," Katherine began, desperately trying to think of a plausible explanation. "There certainly has been." Both Katherine and the marshal turned to find Beau Eckhart standing in the doorway of the general store, arms folded across his chest. "Miss Galloway arrived on my invitation," Beau continued, stepping forward. "She's my cousin from Philadelphia, come to help with my household. I've been without proper domestic help since my housekeeper passed this spring." Katherine stared at him in disbelief. The marshal looked equally skeptical. "That's so. Telegram says she arrived on yesterday's coach from Denver." "That's right," Beau nodded. "She had business in Denver first." "Family matter. I wrote to her months ago asking for her help. Got the letter here somewhere." He made a show of checking his pockets. "No need," the marshal said, though his expression remained doubtful, "but I'll need to confirm this with Denver." "By all means," Beau said amiably. "Though I expect it's just some misunderstanding, probably some other young lady thereafter." The marshal nodded slowly. "Well, until I hear back, I'd appreciate it if Miss Galloway remained in town." "Of course," Katherine said quickly. "I have a room at Madame Foster's." "Actually," Beau cut in, "I was just about to escort my cousin out to the ranch today. Been waiting for her help for quite some time." The marshal frowned. "I'd rather she stayed in town, Eckhart." "I understand your concern, Marshal, but I can vouch for her, and my ranch is just 5 miles out." "She won't be going anywhere." After a long moment, the marshal nodded reluctantly. "All right, but I'll be checking in, mind you." As the marshal walked away, Katherine turned to Beau, confusion and suspicion warring within her. "Why would you do that? You don't know me." "Let's just say I have a feeling about you," he replied, his voice low. "And whatever trouble you're in, I doubt it's as simple as that telegram makes it sound." Katherine glanced around nervously. Several townsfolk had stopped to watch the exchange with the marshal. "I can't involve you in my problems." "Already involved myself," Beau pointed out. "Now, do you want to get out of town before the marshal changes his mind, or would you rather wait around for whoever's coming from Denver?" Put that way, Katherine had little choice. An hour later, she found herself riding beside Beau Eckhart along a dusty trail that wound through scrubby hills toward his ranch. He'd procured a gentle mare for her, just as he'd offered, and had loaded her small suitcase behind his saddle. They rode in silence for the first mile, Catherine's mind racing with questions and fears. Finally, she spoke. "Why are you really helping me, Mr. Eckhart?" He glanced at her, those surprisingly gentle eyes considering her carefully. "Would you believe me if I said I recognized something in you?" "Something I've seen before." "What's that?" The look of someone running from something worse than whatever lies ahead. He adjusted his hat against the sun. "Been there myself once upon a time," Katherine considered this. "And you don't even want to know what I'm running from." "Figure you'll tell me when you're ready, or not. Your choice." His ranch appeared as they crested a hill, a modest affair with a well-built main house, a barn, corral, and several outbuildings. A small creek ran along one side of the property, feeding what looked like a vegetable garden. It wasn't grand, but it spoke of care and hard work. "It's not much," Beau said as they approached, "but it's mine, free and clear. No debts, no partners, no complications." "It's lovely," Katherine replied honestly. After weeks of running, of sleeping in cheap hotels and stagecoaches, the ranch looked like a haven. Inside, the house was simple but clean. A main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace along one wall. 2 doors led off to what Katherine assumed were bedrooms. "You can have the spare room," Beau told her, gesturing to one of the doors. "It's small, but it's private." "Mr. Eckhart, Beau," he corrected. "If we're supposed to be cousins, you'd better use my given name." "Beau," she amended. "I appreciate your help, but I can't stay here. When those men from Denver arrive and realize I'm not who you claimed, by then we'll have figured something out," he assured her. "For now, you need rest and a safe place to think." Katherine wanted to argue further, but exhaustion overtook her. The past weeks of constant vigilance and fear had drained her completely. The prospect of even a brief respite was too tempting to resist. "Thank you," she said finally. "But I want you to know that I'm not a thief. Whatever that telegram said, it isn't true." Beau nodded, seeming unsurprised. "I figured as much. Thieves don't usually look as scared as you do." That evening, after a simple but hearty meal that Beau prepared himself, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and purples. The air was cooling, bringing with it the scent of sage and distant rain. "I was Judge Hollister's ward," Katherine said suddenly, surprising herself with the confession. "My parents died when I was 12. The judge was a friend of my father's, and he took me in." Beau remained silent, giving her space to continue or stop as she wished. "He seemed kind at first, made sure I received an education, introduced me to society when I turned 18, but there were expectations." She swallowed hard. "When I refused his advances, he became cruel. Said I owed him for his generosity, that no one would believe me over him if I complained." Beau's jaw tightened, but still he said nothing. 3 weeks ago, he announced I was to marry his business associate, a man nearly as old as he is. When I refused, he locked me in my room." Katherine's hands trembled slightly as she recalled the terror of those days. "I escaped through the window one night, took enough money from his safe for train fare and some expenses, not the fortune he's claiming, just enough to get away." "And now he's set the law on you," Beau finished for her. "Claiming theft to bring you back without raising suspicions." Katherine nodded. "He's a powerful man, well respected in Denver society. No one would question his word against mine." Beau was quiet for a long moment, considering. "Well," he said finally, "seems to me you did what you had to do. No shame in that. But now I've involved you in my deception," Katherine pointed out. "If they discover you lied to the marshal, let me worry about that," Beau said. "For now, you're safe here. We've got time to figure out our next move." The next few days settled into an unexpected rhythm. Katherine helped around the ranch, grateful for the physical work that kept her mind occupied. Beau taught her basic ranch chores, feeding chickens, tending the vegetable garden, even simple repairs to the chicken coop. They took meals together, sharing stories of their pasts, though Katherine noticed Beau revealed little about what had brought him to Wyoming. On the 3rd day, the marshal rode out to check on them, as promised. Catherine's heart pounded as she watched him approach, but Beau handled the situation with ease, inviting the lawman in for coffee and chatting amicably about ranch business. "Got a reply from Denver," the marshal said eventually, eyeing Katherine. "Judge Hollister confirms a young woman matching your description absconded with valuables from his home." "As I said, must be some other young lady," Beau replied smoothly. "My cousin has been corresponding with me about coming to help for months. I can show you the letters." The marshal raised an eyebrow. "Would appreciate seeing those, actually." Katherine held her breath as Beau crossed to a drawer and pulled out several folded papers. The night before, she'd helped him age some paper with tea and carefully forge a series of letters that established their fictitious family connection. The work had been meticulous, and they'd laughed together over their forgeries despite the serious circumstances. The marshal examined the letters, his expression giving nothing away. Finally, he handed them back. "Seem legitimate enough," he conceded. "Still, the Denver authorities are sending someone to identify the woman in person, should arrive on Friday's stage." "We'll be here," Beau assured him. "Nothing to hide." After the marshal departed, Katherine sank into a chair, trembling. "Friday, that's only 2 days away." "Then we have 2 days to prepare," Beau said calmly, "or to get you somewhere else if that's what you decide." "Where would I go?" Katherine asked, despair creeping into her voice. "If not Denver, then somewhere else. Always running, always looking over my shoulder." Beau knelt before her, taking her hands in his. "There are other options, Katherine." "Like what?" she asked bitterly. "Like staying, fighting." "Telling your story." Katherine shook her head. "No one would believe me over Judge Hollister." "Maybe not in Denver," Beau conceded, "but the territories are different. People judge you more by what they see with their own eyes than by reputation or position." "What are you suggesting?" Beau took a deep breath. "Marry me." Katherine stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "What, marry me?" he repeated. "Before Friday, as my wife, you'd have my protection. The law respects marriage, even out here. It would complicate things for Hollister's men." That's absurd," Katherine stammered. "We barely know each other." "I know enough," Beau said simply. "I know you're brave and resourceful. I know you work hard and don't complain. I know you faced terrible choices and made the best decisions you could. But marriage—" Katherine stood, pacing the small room. "That's not a solution, it's just another trap." Beau rose as well, his expression serious. "It wouldn't be like that. I'm offering you a partnership, Katherine, a safe haven, nothing more than you're willing to give. Why would you do this?" She asked, bewildered by his offer. "Take such a risk for a stranger." Something flickered in Beau's eyes, a shadow of old pain. "Because once someone did something similar for me when I needed it most, and because—" he hesitated. "Because in these few days, I've come to care for you more than I expected to." Katherine felt a flush rise to her cheeks. She couldn't deny she'd felt a growing connection to this quiet, steadfast man. His kindness, his respect for her boundaries, his willingness to help without demanding explanations all had affected her more deeply than she cared to admit. "I need time to think," she said finally. Beau nodded. "Of course, it's a big decision, but remember, we don't have much time." That night, Katherine lay awake in the small bedroom, weighing her options. She could flee again, head north as she'd originally planned, try to lose herself in the wilderness. But for how long? How far would Hollister's reach extend? Or she could stay and face her accusers, hope that someone might believe her word against the judges. A fool's hope. Or she could accept Beau's offer. Marriage to a man she barely knew, yet one who had shown her nothing but kindness and respect. A man whose quiet strength had begun to make her feel safe for the first time in years. By morning, she had made her decision. Beau was already up, making coffee in the kitchen when she emerged from her room. One look at her face told him all he needed to know. "Yes," she said simply. His smile was like the sunrise, warm and full of promise. "I'll ride into town today, speak with the preacher. We can be married tomorrow before Hollister's men arrive." The next 24 hours passed in a blur of preparation and nervous anticipation. Beau returned from town with news that the preacher had agreed to perform the ceremony the following morning. He also brought fabric for Katherine to make a new dress, nothing fancy, but a soft blue calico that complemented her eyes. The general store owner's wife helped me choose it, Beau admitted, somewhat sheepishly. Told her my cousin needed something nice for a special occasion. Katherine worked through the evening to fashion the simple dress, grateful for the familiar task that kept her hands busy and her mind from dwelling too much on the enormity of what she was about to do. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright. They rode into town together, the new blue dress carefully folded in Katherine's saddlebag. At Madame Foster's, the older woman helped Katherine prepare, her earlier suspicions seemingly forgotten as she fussed over the bride-to-be. "Never thought I'd see the day Beau Eckhart took a wife," Madame Foster commented as she helped pin up Katherine's hair. "That man's kept to himself since he arrived here 5 years ago. Must be something special about you to break through that shell of his." Katherine met the woman's gaze in the mirror. "I don't know about that. We haven't known each other long." "Time's got nothing to do with it, child. Some folks just recognize what they need when they see it." Madame Foster's weathered hands gently settled a simple wreath of wildflowers atop Katherine's curls. There, simple but lovely. The ceremony itself was brief but surprisingly moving. The small church at the edge of town was empty save for the preacher, Beau, Katherine, and 2 witnesses, Madame Foster and, unexpectedly, the marshal himself. "Figured if I'm going to vouch for this union when those Denver folks arrive, I ought to see it happen," he explained gruffly. Beau stood tall and solemn before the altar, his usually dusty work clothes replaced with a clean black suit that emphasized the breadth of his shoulders. When Katherine entered wearing her blue dress and the crown of wildflowers, his expression softened in a way that made her heart skip. The vows were traditional, spoken clearly by both despite the unusual circumstances that had brought them to this moment. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Beau's kiss was gentle, respectful, yet Katherine felt an unexpected warmth spread through her at the brief contact. "Mrs. Eckhart," he whispered as they turned to face the small assembly, his hand warm against the small of her back. The name felt strange but not unwelcome. For the first time since fleeing Denver, Katherine felt a glimmer of hope for the future. They returned to the ranch with little fanfare, both acutely aware that tomorrow would bring a confrontation with Hollister's men. The reality of their situation temporarily overshadowed the significance of their new union. "You think it will work?" Katherine asked as they sat on the porch that evening, watching the sunset as had become their custom. "It complicates things for them," Beau replied. "You're no longer Katherine Galloway, ward of Judge Hollister. You're Katherine Eckhart, my wife, with all the legal protections that entails." "But if they have a warrant, let me worry about that part," Beau said, his jaw set with determination. "I've made some arrangements in town. We won't be facing this alone." True to the marshal's information, the stage arrived the following day bearing 2 men from Denver, a private detective in Hollister's employ named Harker, and a young lawyer who introduced himself as James Peterson. The marshal brought them out to the ranch himself, arriving just as Beau and Katherine were finishing the morning chores. Katherine's stomach twisted with anxiety as she recognized Harker, the detective who had often done Hollister's less savory errands. "That's her," Harker declared immediately, pointing at Katherine. "That's Katherine Galloway, the judge's ward." "Actually," the marshal corrected, "this is Mrs. Katherine Eckhart, wife of Beau Eckhart. They were married yesterday morning. I was a witness." Harker's face darkened with anger. "This is preposterous. She's a thief, and she's using this sham marriage to avoid justice." "Watch your tongue when speaking about my wife," Beau said quietly, but with an undercurrent of steel that made Harker take a step back. The lawyer, Peterson, cleared his throat. "Miss Galloway or Mrs. Eckhart, if you prefer, Judge Hollister is deeply concerned about you. He feared you might have been coerced or manipulated into leaving Denver." "The only coercion was from the judge himself," Katherine replied steadily. "He locked me in my room when I refused to marry a man of his choosing." "These are serious allegations against a respected judge," Peterson replied, though Katherine noticed he didn't seem particularly surprised. "They're the truth," she insisted. Be that as it may, there's still the matter of the stolen funds and valuables, Harker cut in. I took enough money for train fare and basic expenses, Katherine said. Hardly the fortune he's claiming. The judge is willing to drop the theft charges, Peterson offered, if you return to Denver voluntarily. I'm sure he is, Beau said dryly, but my wife isn't going anywhere. This doesn't concern you, Eckhart, Harker snapped. This is between the judge and his ward. Former ward, the marshal corrected. She's a married woman now. A marriage that won't hold up when it's revealed it was entered into to obstruct justice, Harker argued. That's enough, came a new voice. All turned to see Frank Wilson, the blacksmith, approaching with several other townsmen. We don't take kindly to outsiders coming here and making accusations against our neighbors. This is a legal matter, Harker began. Maybe so, Frank interrupted, but we've got our own way of handling things out here. Beau Eckhart's a respected man in this community. If he says this young lady is his wife and not a thief, that carries weight with us. The marshal nodded in agreement. I've sent telegrams to several contacts in Denver, he added. Seems Judge Hollister has a history of unusual relationships with his female wards. You're not the first to leave under mysterious circumstances, Mrs. Eckhart. Katherine felt a surge of vindication at this news, though it was tempered by sadness for the other girls who must have suffered as she had. Peterson and Harker exchanged glances, clearly recognizing they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. The judge won't be pleased, Harker muttered. The judge can take it up with the territorial courts if he wishes, the marshal replied. But I think he'll find it's not worth the scandal, especially given what my inquiries have turned up. After further argument, the Denver men departed, though Harker's parting glare promised this wasn't truly over. Katherine watched them go with a mixture of relief and lingering anxiety. Thank you, she said to the assembled townspeople. I never expected such support. Frank Wilson shrugged. Beau's done right by this town many times over, figured it was time we returned the favor. As the others dispersed, Katherine turned to Beau. Did you arrange all this? He smiled slightly. Let's just say I had a word with a few friends. People here look out for their own. And I'm one of their own now, just like that. You're my wife, he said simply. That makes you family to these folks. The word wife still felt strange on her ears, a role she had taken on so suddenly for such practical reasons. Yet standing there beside Beau, with his quiet strength and unwavering support, Katherine felt something shift within her. This arrangement, begun as a matter of protection and convenience, had the potential to become something more. That evening, as they sat together on the porch, the air between them felt different, charged with possibility. You think they'll come back? Katherine asked, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. Possibly, Beau admitted, but we'll face that together if it happens. Katherine studied his profile in the fading light. Why did you really help me, Beau? The whole truth this time? He was quiet for a long moment. When I was 20, I got into trouble back east, serious trouble. A man was killed in a bar fight. I wasn't responsible, but I was there, and the man who died was the son of a powerful local businessman. Katherine listened intently as he continued. I ran west, certain they'd hang me if they caught me, ended up in Colorado, half-starved and desperate. An old rancher found me sleeping in his barn. Instead of shooting me or turning me in, he offered me work. Later, when men came looking for me, he hid me, protected me, gave me time to prove myself, to build a new life. What happened to him? Katherine asked softly. Died 3 years later. Left me enough money to start my own place. Beau's voice held reverence for the memory. He taught me that sometimes a person just needs someone to believe in them when the rest of the world doesn't. Katherine reached for his hand, twining her fingers with his. Thank you for believing in me. It wasn't hard, he replied, his eyes meeting hers. There's something about you, Katherine, something that called to me from the moment I saw you step off that stagecoach. The admission hung between them, honest and vulnerable. Katherine felt a warmth bloom in her chest that had nothing to do with the summer evening. What happens now? She asked. With us, I mean. Beau turned to face her fully. That's up to you. This marriage started as protection, as a way to keep you safe, but if you want, it could become real. In time, And if I wanted to leave eventually, to start a new life somewhere else, then I'd help you do that, he answered without hesitation. All I ask is that you give us a fair chance first. Katherine considered his words. The past weeks had taught her that safety was a rare and precious thing. But what Beau offered went beyond mere safety. He offered respect, partnership, and the possibility of something she had never truly experienced, love freely given, without obligation or expectation. I'd like to try, she said finally, to see what this could become. The smile that broke across his face was like sunshine after a storm. Slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wished, he leaned forward and kissed her, not the brief, ceremonial kiss of their wedding, but something deeper, a promise and a beginning. As summer turned to autumn and autumn to winter, the marriage that had begun as a refuge transformed into something neither had expected. Katherine flourished in her new life, learning the ways of the ranch, making friends in town, and discovering strengths within herself she hadn't known existed. The nightmares of her time with Judge Hollister gradually faded, replaced by dreams of the future she was building with Beau. Hollister made one final attempt to reclaim her, sending a formal legal challenge to their marriage. But by then, the marshal had gathered enough evidence of the judge's misconduct toward other wards that the matter was quietly dropped. Katherine received word that the judge had retired from the bench, moving to Europe for his health. On their first anniversary, Beau presented Katherine with the deed to the ranch, amended to include her name alongside his. Equal partners, he explained as she stared at the document in surprise. In everything? I never imagined this, Katherine admitted, tears welling in her eyes. When I fled Denver, I was just running away. I never thought I'd find someone to run toward. And I never thought I'd find someone willing to see past my rough edges, Beau replied, drawing her into his arms. Someone who'd match me stride for stride in building this life. Their kiss sealed more than the legal partnership represented by the deed. It affirmed the deeper bond that had grown between them, a love built on respect, honesty, and the courage to believe in second chances. In the years that followed, the ranch prospered under their joint care. They added rooms to the house, as their family grew, first a daughter with Katherine's chestnut hair and Beau's thoughtful eyes, then twin boys who inherited their father's height and their mother's determination. The whispers that had once followed Katherine through town were long forgotten, replaced by genuine respect for the capable woman she had become. Sometimes, on summer evenings, they still sat together on the porch, watching the sunset paint the Wyoming sky in shades of gold and crimson. In those quiet moments, Katherine would often reflect on the strange twist of fate that had brought her to Rattlesnake Gulch and how her greatest fear had led her to her greatest joy. "What are you thinking about?" Beau would ask, noting her contemplative smile. "About hiding," she would reply, leaning into the comfort of his embrace. "And how sometimes when you're hiding from one thing, you end up finding everything else you need."